as tensions between Washington and Caracas escalate. President Trump has confirmed his first direct phone call with Nicolas Maduro, a rare acknowledgement amid a rapidly shifting political moment. The United States has declared Venezuelan airspace fully closed and continues to signal a firmer regional posture. In Caracas, the National Assembly has opened an investigation into recent U.S. actions, reflecting growing political pressure inside Venezuela. Will Trump's confirmation of the call ease the standoff or widen the political divide? How will both governments navigate this moment as communication and confrontation unfold in parallel? And what influence might global actors like Russia and China exert as regional tensions rise? And I'm Salma El-Fiki, and welcome to In Depth. President Trump confirmed Sunday that he recently spoke by phone with Venezuela's Nicolas Maduro, but offered no details, saying only that it was a phone call. And according to Le Monde, the conversation reportedly touched on possible amnesty terms if Maduro were to step down, even as tensions between Washington and Caracas continue to escalate. The U.S. has increased its military presence in the Caribbean and accused Maduro of leading a major drug trafficking network, claiming Venezuela dismissing as a push for regime change. Washington says the mission targets trafficking, while Caracas accuses the U.S. of plotting an attack. Le Monde also noted that the U.S. does not recognize Maduro as the legitimate winner of last year's election. While Trump hasn't threatened force, he recently said efforts to stop Venezuelan drug trafficking by land will begin very soon.
A sharp political escalation is unfolding between Washington and Caracas. U.S. President Donald Trump confirmed he has spoken directly with Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, even as the U.S. continues a series of operations targeting boats Washington says are linked to criminal networks in Venezuelan-controlled waters. Venezuela responded by formally accusing the United States of violating its sovereignty, while Maduro described Trump's decision to close the airspace as a colonial threat. Several Caribbean governments have also questioned the legality of the operations, demanding clarity from Washington on the rules under which these strikes were conducted. Trump offered no details about the contents of the conversation, saying only the answer is yes when he asked if he spoke with Maduro, and describing the call as neither positive nor negative. The confirmation comes at a time when U.S. officials have declared Venezuelan airspace closed in its entirety, and the U.S. military is reportedly poised for a new phase of operations in the Caribbean targeted suspected trafficking routes. Maduro's government and Venezuelan institutions are watching closely, and some officials have declined to comment on the phone call, while the country's legislature is launching a formal investigation into the recent deadly strikes on suspected drug trafficking boats. The situation has become a major flashpoint in U.S.-Latin American relations. The question now is whether these tensions will lead to deeper confrontation or force a political reset in Washington's approach to Venezuela.
And for more analysis, we are joined from Caracas by Mr. Adel El-Sghir, the former member of the Venezuelan Parliament and the former advisor to the Venezuelan National Defense Council, and from Washington by Mr. Justin Thomas Russell, the Executive Director of the Global Foreign Policy Center. Welcome, gentlemen, and thank you so much for joining me here today at In Depth. Mr. Adel, let me ask you first. President Trump has now confirmed speaking directly with President Nicolas Maduro. From your perspective, what does this phone call signal politically inside Venezuela, and how is it perceived by the government and the security establishment?
start, uh, I would like to comment or highlight something, a very special situation in Venezuela. We see outside, for example, the nearest point between the U.S. and Venezuela, you can see that there is a very large space. They're very far from each other, and actually, we have islands and countries between these two countries, like Puerto Rico, and tons of islands actually. And these islands actually have sovereignty, and they have full-on governments. And so when we are talking about all of these accusations, uh, if we just look at the map itself actually makes all the accusations void, because these boats that these boats are actually small, so they cannot go that far, and it is impossible to reach the U.S. coast. And so all of these accusations and statements from the U.S. government are actually, as I said, very void when it comes to this here. And so it is no doubt that the call that happened between the two presidents, the U.S. and Venezuelan president, and Trump has confirmed. It is a proof that there are ongoing talks and ongoing calls, and that they haven't released an official statement to the media or have a report about what happened in these calls. And there are, of course, lots of justifications that lots of media can use and can say, especially in the U.S. And this is because actually the U.S. here with deploying their army to Venezuela, and their influence, their major friends to go and take over the coastal borders here. This shows that
Um,
they've been waiting to have some kind of division in the Venezuelan army, so that they can throw Maduro off, and this hasn't happened and won't happen.
okay, let me ask Mr. Russell, sir. Trump's confirmation of a call with Maduro is a major political moment. What does it reveal about Washington's evolving strategy towards Venezuela?
Well, good afternoon, Salma. Always
Thank
good to
you.
be with you.
Hello.
Look,
Thanks.
the reality is that until we get the full readout from the conversations with Maduro and Trump, it's just guessing. It's hyperbole. We've heard everything from it was an offer to get him out and he will not be prosecuted by the United States. I've heard that there's some sort of treasure chest deal that might be available to Maduro if he walks out. But let's just make one thing clear. The idea that Donald Trump has put out there for the actions against Venezuela, against Nicolas Maduro, and why he's doing that has been completely debunked. This is regime change 101. This is textbook regime change. It is not about the drug enforcement. It is not about that, because a couple of things. Number one, if you are trying to do, true enforcement of international and even U.S. law, as somebody who used to enforce these laws as a member of the United States Coast Guard, I can tell you this is not how you do it. You go, you interdict the vessels, you arrest the people that are trafficking the narcotics, you get the intelligence from them, and you go for the bigger fish. You go and you hit the supply lines. That's number one. Number two, what is happening is Donald Trump has put stuff into, covert action into Venezuela. You don't do international law enforcement by doing covert actions and broadcasting it out to the world. It's supposed to be covert. This is regime change. But back to your original question, Selma, is it a big change? We don't know because, again, this is two immovable forces. Maduro is sitting there hopeful that he's going to get the support of Russia and possibly China to go into his side, and quite frankly, our allies are pulling away from U.S. policy because nobody wants to be a part of what is largely seen as either a war crime or violations of international law and the international law of the sea.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Mr. Adel, reports suggest that the conversation touched on possible amnesty for Maduro if he steps down. And just as my guest, Mr. Russell, was mentioning, how realistic is that scenario, do you think?
Of course, the U.S. is waiting for a miracle, basically, and they just don't stop, with releasing information that aren't that true. No report has come out, or any piece of information has actually come out, and so they're facing an issue now, and especially when it comes to Trump, is because the Venezuelan opposition, they have to, I'm talking about the opposition in the U.S., the representatives of the Venezuelan opposition, because opposition in Venezuela have actually taken a unified stance against military intervention in their internal affairs. And so the opposition here, actually, that is in the Venezuelan parliament, they have refused this intervention, and they refuse such accusations that the U.S. Has made, and there is a fascist opposition in the U.S., and they are actually getting paid by the U.S. government, but and they have led Trump to say such things, because once they deploy their military force, then there will be demonstrations and division in Venezuela. This is what they thought, and what they tried to convince Trump with, but this didn't happen. We didn't have a single demonstration or any division in the army, because this lie here actually put them in a problem here, because Trump now has to justify to the American community he needs to explain why he deployed such large numbers of the military, and in vain, basically. And so he is waiting for a miracle. He will want some kind of violation in the Venezuelan government, or a division in the military, and so deploying his army in another country, or going out to another country. As I said, there is not a single report or a single piece of information that shows that they really did what they're accused of. And so the USA government needs to reconsider, because they need to reconsider their policy, because they're being just unbelievable. We've seen them do this with other countries, not just with Venezuela. I remember a while ago when Trump actually has threatened another country before, and told them to join the US to be the 51st state, and he also threatened the Denmark as well. He threatened Denmark, and so not just Venezuela.
Yep.
This is not their only victim, not, and so yeah.
Okay, Mr. Russell, the U.S. continues to posture politically and militarily in the Caribbean basin. Can you share with us and tell us a little bit what broader geopolitical objectives are shaping this assertive strategy? And we have kind of a double standards, having Trump pardoning the Honduran president, but still focusing on Venezuela, drug trafficking. What are the ulterior motives? What's happening?
I don't think anybody really knows, Selma. I mean that you bring up a very valid point that is starting to get the attention
Yeah,
of a lot of our allies. Even is the fact that did Nicolas Maduro not cozy up to Trump the way he should have, the way we've seen with other dictators who have been
exactly.
even who have even been convicted of drug crimes in this country
Yeah,
that he is now pardoned
and they're
or given
pardoned.
a pass
Yeah.
to. Correct, correct. So yeah, there is a huge double standard here. Everybody's asking, what is the transactional value to this? Look, let's be clear. Nicolas Maduro is not the legitimate leader of Venezuela. Nicolas Maduro is a thug. Is Nicolas Maduro involved in drug trafficking? More than likely. But the reality is, it does not justify the actions that are being taken by the Trump administration. In fact, all it does is solidify Nicolas Maduro's position as a victim
Hmm.
and brings the global community to him. And it further alienates us even from our own allies. When you have our own allies that are not even playing with us in the intelligence community, that have withdrawn support because they don't want to have culpability in what is being largely looked at as an international violation of law, that's a big concern. And that is something that is getting bipartisan questioning from Congress here in Washington. Look, again, I go back to my original point, though, Selma, is that this is regime change. The
Hmm.
actions being taken by Donald Trump by having these ongoing phone calls, these ongoing deal negotiations. The question is, what deal is he offering? And
Exactly.
this is not how the U.S. uses its soft power, especially in its own hemisphere in our backyard.
Mr. Idel, Washington continues to pressure Venezuela while simultaneously keeping an open communication channel. Uh, how does Caracas interpret this dual strategy of pressure and dialogue at the same time?
He, of how the U.S. is acting and their behavior, it is actually illegal, and it is refused and frowned upon by all countries around the world. And we've seen all or a number of countries refusing this political approach that they're using, and threatening Venezuela. We've seen Britain's stance, for example. They have condemned the U.S. deploying its military army in the Caribbean, and the same thing happened with France, because in the Caribbean there are countries that are members of they were actually settlements. They were actually British settlements, and they've asked Britain to make up their mind when it comes to this, because this has actually harmed the region economically. And so fishing, for example, has stopped. It has fully stopped because everyone is afraid now to show up basically in the Caribbean, and even tourism has been affected hugely. And so it is no doubt that the U.S. After they're in a dilemma now, and they didn't see any outcomes of what they did in Venezuela, and they have seen no results when it comes to, as I said, demonstrations. For example, there are no demonstrations. There is nothing that has actually supported America's policy. That is just chaotic, to say the least. And so when they saw that there were no use, and everything that they have done was actually in vain, this military threatening, and so they're waiting for a miracle now. They're waiting for something to happen to change everything, and maybe ultimately some other countries will get involved as well to resolve this conflict, but the U.S. has had meetings and they haven't talked about narcotics. For example, they are saying that Venezuela is responsible to send narcotics to America. If we look at the UN charters, it says that 87% of the narcotics that are sent to the U.S. are actually through another ocean, and Venezuela doesn't have anything to do with it. Actually, as you know, we're in the Caribbean, and they actually go through Ecuador, the narcotics, even though Ecuador doesn't produce any narcotics, but they actually send 70% of them to Colombia and Peru, for example. And then, in addition to this, the rest of them are sent through Mexico.
Yep. Mr. Russell, internal debate in Washington is intensifying regarding how recent decisions were taken. From a policy perspective, how does the American public opinion view the situation with Venezuela?
Regarding how the Trump administration is handling the situation with Venezuela, Trump is underwater. Bottom line, okay. Donald Trump is losing support of the American people in the way that he's handling a lot of his foreign policies outside of the Middle East, and this one continues to take a nosedive. The American people are starting to look at this as just, Donald Trump campaigned on being a man of peace, as being the great deal maker. And yet here he is getting us into another armed conflict in our own backyard, which puts American service members at risk. It's not very popular here with it's not very popular here with the American voters, and that's starting to take a toll on his overall polling numbers here in the United States.
Okay. Mr. Adel, the U.S. has declared the Venezuelan airspace closed in its entirety. How is this classified politically in Caracas? As an act of escalation? Is it a form of intimidation, especially that Maduro described it as a colonial threat?
This here is a colonial threat, yes, there is no doubt, and it is violating a country's sovereignty, and in spite of this report and statement, they have tried to close they have decided to have an airspace closure. This is actually unacceptable, even according to the international laws. This is just not honoring and basically making fun of the UN Charter and the international laws. But in spite of everything, the airspace in Venezuela is still somewhat open. There are planes that can go beyond the borders, like the Colombian planes coming from Colombia and from Chile. And so, yeah, of course, things aren't how they used to be. They're affected some way or another. But they think of this behavior. As I said, this behavior is actually not honoring any of the international laws, and so it actually threatens this airspace closure. It actually affects and threatens the planes that are still in Venezuela's airspace. This is how we think of it. This is a violation, and it is a mockery of a country that has its own sovereignty. And so, yes, as I said, the USA didn't honor any of the international laws or any of the UN charters that have to do about the air traffic.
Mr. Russell, as Washington intensifies pressure on Caracas, Russia and China continue to position themselves as key political backers of the Maduro government. From a U.S. foreign policy standpoint, how do Moscow and Beijing's roles shape the strategic environment, and do they limit Washington's diplomatic leverage in managing this crisis, do you think?
It's a great question, Selma, and I think that's one of the concerns that people here in Washington have about this is, are we, in this little head-to-head with Venezuela, are we continuing to increase the presence and the power of our adversaries, namely Beijing and Moscow, in South America? This has been a concern that I've had for several years now, that we are losing our ability to maintain a soft power presence in South America and Central America, and that's a concern. I think what we're going to see here is that if the U.S. does take direct action, military action in Venezuela, and attack the sovereign lands of the Venezuelans, this is going to force the hand of the leadership in Caracas to pretty much join hands with Moscow and Beijing. Moscow and Beijing can give them military support. They can give them political support. Beijing can give them financial support, which they've done for several years before this even became an issue. So the bottom line here is that, yeah, this is going to make Russia and China stronger in the Western Hemisphere. It's going to weaken the U.S. position in South America, and it's going to continue to weaken our position with our allies that have strategic interests in this hemisphere, namely the British and the Dutch and several of our other allies that have Commonwealth nations inside the Caribbean.
Yep. Mr. Adel, and what's your take regarding the Russia and China backing of the Maduro government and in shaping the regional balance at this moment? Could maybe their backing influence the diplomatic space available to both the U.S. and Venezuela?
There's no doubt, yeah, because China and Russia are they're a topic of discussion between Venezuela and the USA. It is one of the US has actually called for Venezuela to stop sending fuel to China and to put a limit to their strategic relationship with Russia, and then also transforming the arms support from Russia to come from the US. And so there are lots of conditions that the USA is proposing here, and all of these proposals they have nothing to do with the narcotics issue. In their meetings with the Venezuelan government, they're not talking about narcotics, and so it doesn't have to do with narcotics. Actually, it has to do with fuel and the gold mines that they have. They have lots of gold there, and so ultimately there is no doubt that China and Russia will enter into the equation, and of course they aren't happy with what's happening now and anything that's happening in Venezuela, and so we're calling for the governments to actually have our backs. And I have information that President Putin has talked more than once with Trump. It wasn't in the public, but they have talked about Venezuela and about having negotiations and agreeing on the USA benefits and Russia's and China's benefits also in Venezuela.
Well, that was Mr. Adel El-Zghir, the former member of the Venezuelan parliament and the former advisor to the Venezuelan National Defense Council. and Mr. Justin Thomas Russell, the Executive Director of the Global Foreign Policy Center. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your insights. And this brings us to the end of today's episode for In Depth, and thank you so much for joining us, and do stay tuned for more updates on Q News.